All right, and we are live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation. Today, I am really excited to be spending my afternoon hanging out with some amazing Jane Austen fan fiction authors. We've got some stunning backgrounds going on. We've already been having a little bit of chat beforehand, so I know this is going to be a really fun hour. We're going to talk a little bit at the beginning about modern adaptations in Austen, explore what it's like to turn her stories into modern day stories. And then the second half, we will talk a bit about Jane Austen July, which I am very excited about. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of pick what we're going to read for each of the prompts. Our guests are all going to have recommendations, which I'm really excited to see the variety that we have and what we all picked for that. So without further ado, I will let each of our guests introduce themselves so we can get to know a bit about them. Feel free to share if you want to your latest release, if you have series or whatnot, so that we can kind of get a feel for also what you have written as well. So Rihanna, if you want to go ahead and kick things off for us.
Oh, no pressure, no pressure.
I know.
I'm Rihanna Everly. It's a pen name. Most of you know me, or some of you know me by my real name, which I will not divulge right now. But let's see, my dad gave me a copy of Emma when I was 11 years old. And he said, you might enjoy this. And I read it, and I think I understood a fifth of it. But I was intrigued enough that as I got older, I kept trying until I realized this stuff is amazing. I've been writing little stories forever. I started writing Jeff about 2015, and I now have 13 novels, most romances, most historical, but some of them are mysteries, and a bunch of contemporaries. And I will. So the first contemporary. Well, I'll tell you one more thing. I'm a musician as well. I'm a classically trained musician. So music, and same with Amanda. I know music is part of my life. It's what I do. And when I began writing contemporary Austen, I had so much fun really diving into that part of my life. So my first contemporary is called Preludes, and it's a modern adaptation of Persuasion set in contemporary Toronto in the world of classical music, which is what I do. So I got to dive into the world of the orchestra and the symphony and Jane Austen at the same time, and that was just amazing. And with that in my mind, I spoke to a publisher from New Zealand about an idea I had, and through them I published a series of novellas, also based in contemporary Toronto, this time in a concert choir, and I'll just very quickly hold them up. This one, All the Wrong Notes, is Pride and Prejudice. The Matchmaker's Melody is based on Emma, and the second ending, I went back into Persuasion, and I got to sit in on the rehearsal of a contemporary local choir, and I got to write about that. And I had so much fun, and I just love bringing Austen into the modern world, as well as writing historical. And I'll move on to something.
I love that you were able to merge your passions there into your stories. It's so much fun to kind of not just reinvent the characters, but give them your own passions as it plays out. So thank you so much for sharing those with her. And your covers are gorgeous, by the way. I really love those covers. Sarah, you are kind of clockwise on my screen. I don't know if you are for everybody else, but we'll go to you next.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am Sarah Marks. I write the 21st Century Austen rom-com series. I got started with Jane Austen in high school, anticipating that I was going to have to read Pride and Prejudice anyway, and hoping for a little heat, because I did like to just flip through to the sex scenes in my romance books, but did not get that, obviously. I think we all know what I was disappointed by, but I understood none of it because I was 15 years old. So who understands anything at that point? But after college, I revisited Pride and Prejudice, and of course, understood it significantly more. But then a friend suggested if I liked that, I would probably like Persuasion. And I have read Emma. I got into Emma because of Clueless. Once someone said, "Oh no, that's just Austen's Clueless," I thought, "Oh, I know her." And that's where it started. Persuasion is still my favorite to this day. And in 2014, I wrote the very first draft of what became Modern Persuasion. This is the first book in the series, and it's about an author on a book tour. I don't know how I came up with that idea. I'm also a librarian in my 9-to-5 job and routinely went to book publishing events in New York City. So it was all based around my experience there. And then it's going to be an 8-book series, but 6 of the books are out. The latest is Sweeten Up Ginny Darcy. I have to always remember where the camera is. It's Pride and Prejudice, but it's a gender swap. So she's our Darcy, and it's in a candy shop. And poor me had to learn about candy making. Unraveling Carrie Woodhouse is one of the Emma modernizations set in a yarn shop. And then Love from Northanger Park's Katie is the Northanger Abbey adaptation. And I had to make up my own theme park. So I had to go to Disney because I can't legally use them. And then the 2 university set ones, Love and War in Woodhouse Hall, which is set in a dorm, and it's Emma also. And then Pride, Prejudice, and Pledging, which is sorority. It's Pride and Prejudice. So that's my series. And then I have short story collections for bonus content and stories and anthologies that are part of the series. And the 7th book is up on my Patreon for advanced early access, and I will be finishing the final book in the series this weekend.
Okay.
Draft.
Now tell the truth. Are you picking themes just so you can go visit places and put it into the book? I feel like
that's how I work. When I learn something new or I want to learn about something new, I'm like, well, let's just write it into a book. And then I don't know, maybe write it off my taxes.
The candy making research must have been very difficult.
It was very difficult.
With your taste test too, just to make sure for the reader's sake it was all okay.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing with us. And Amanda, let us know a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda Kai, and I first fell in love with Jane Austen in 2005. My mom took me to the theater and we watched the Pride and Prejudice movie with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden, and I was hooked. I had to go out and buy all of the Jane Austen books, read them all, and I was an addict from that moment on. And I dabbled some with fan fiction in those early years, but it really wasn't until after the birth of my son that I really began doing more fan fiction writing. As Rihanna mentioned, we both have a musical background. I actually started out my career as a harpist. I played the harp for weddings and events, and I taught harp lessons, and I did all of that. And then, after I started having children, it just became more and more difficult to balance that work family life. I was always gone or teaching when my husband was home and vice versa. So we never saw each other, and we were always on duty with the kids whenever the other one was working. So it just wasn't working. So we decided, okay, I'm going to hang up that hat for a while. Well, I needed a creative outlet, something to do with all that energy. So I started writing fan fiction, and I wrote my first book, Marriage in Ministry, which is a Charlotte and Mr. Collins story. And that was published on Amazon in 2019. And then from there, it just kept growing. This year, I published 2 novels. One was a collection of April Fool's short stories. And then I also published my first modern retelling. Let's see if I can get the camera to show it. This is Swipe Right for Mr. Darcy.
Cute.
There we go. Now I got it in the frame. So that was really fun to write. And that kind of came about a little bit by accident. I intended it to be a short story, but it just kind of grew and grew on its own. And by the time it was done, I had a whole novel. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm publishing 2 books in April now.
It's nice when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really happy accident. So I'm very happy with it.
The first question back to you then and ask you, what made you decide that you wanted to put Austen's characters or some of the characters in a modern setting? What kind of inspired that?
Well, so Swipe Right for Mr. Darcy was actually inspired. I had a little Facebook conversation starter post, write a modern tagline for your favorite Jane Austen book. And one of my fans, Laura, she wrote Swipe Right for Mr. Darcy as the tagline. And I thought, that's a really good name for a book. And the wheels in my head just started turning, and I started thinking about Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth, using Tinder as, that form of rejection for Elizabeth. Mr. Darcy decides to swipe left on Elizabeth's profile picture, and she happens to be in the club and sees him do it and overhears this conversation between Bingley and Darcy, and that kind of sets it off. And so from there, it was just a matter of putting the characters, into this modern setting and writing the story. And I had the club scene written out at first, and then I was like, well, how am I gonna continue this story? How are Darcy and Elizabeth going to continue to interact, throughout their everyday life? And so I ended up deciding to set it in this fictional town, Meriton, Iowa. It's small town outside of Des Moines. I'm from Texas, but a lot of my family are from Iowa. It's where my parents grew up. So it was kind of natural to have this Midwestern setting and sort of this place that maybe Caroline Bingley and Lady Catherine, who are uppity East Coast folks, they might kind of look down on somebody that's from the Midwest, farming community and all of that. And so that's kind of how that took off. And then one of my good friends who often does beta reading and alpha reading for me, she's in the medical field. And so she suggested, well, why don't you have, if Bingley and Jane are going to be a doctor and a nurse, why don't you have Elizabeth and Darcy be in the medical field, but in the corporate side of things? So that's how that kind of came about. So Elizabeth is the VP of her dad's company, Longbourn, which is, they contract out physical therapy services to hospitals and clinics. And then Darcy is the president of the Pemberley Medical Group, this corporation that owns hospitals across the nation. So through that, they were able to meet and interact on the business side of things. So that was really fun to kind of put them in something, a little bit different than the usual gentleman and lady settings.
Yeah. And I love that rejection can be relatable no matter what time period you live in. But I just love that concept of how do you make it modern? Seeing somebody in real time rejecting you on an app is like just as crushing as overhearing him, making a remark about you to his friend in a ballroom. So perfect. Sarah, why don't we go ahead and go to you? What made you decide that you are going to put your books in a modern setting?
Well, I am not a big historical fiction reader. I do enjoy it. The way I got into Jane Austen fan fiction was through the historicals, but I found historical readers are really attentive to the details of historical accuracy. That's just fair. That's what you're here for. Historical romance. But I am not that writer. I was not interested in doing that kind of research. I realized that a lot of the themes hit in a modern way. The tagline for the series is Modern Women, Classic Problems. So I really wanted to focus, and persuasion was the one I really got into. I was sitting on a train going to this conference that no longer exists, Book Expo, and thinking about persuasion and wondering what could somebody do to persuade a couple in the modern era to break up when women have all of these options ahead of them and aren't reliant on their family. And I really wanted to tell stories where women weren't going to end up necessarily in marriage, having families, focused on their families. I wanted to tell something for women who wanted to be career building at an early age instead of at a later age, or stopping their career building to raise their family or things like that. So as I walked around Book Expo, the story just kept coming to me, to the point where I think I sat down for a National Novel Writing Month event the next month and realized it just flew out of me at that point. I saw the characters in my head. I understood why, if you have two people with careers on opposite ends of the country, that makes it really difficult to stay together. And we value our mentors. We value our experts. We trust the people we care about. It's so very easy to persuade someone to do something that you believe is best for them. And when they're young and they don't know themselves enough to know if that's an accurate perspective or not, of course they want to believe someone they love. So it was really Emma. It was really easy for Emma to say no to Frederick because she trusted the person who convinced her this was just not going to work.
Yeah.
So and having had those conversations with my mentors in my own life, I often pull a lot from my experiences, but other people around me and their experiences and relationships.
It's always exciting, just like Amanda had, when a story just comes to you and it's there. I mean, you still have to work out, I'm sure, plenty of plot points, but you can kind of see the beginning to the end and it can just flow.
Yeah.
It's so exciting, I'm sure, as a writer. Last but certainly not least, you want to tell us how you ended up coming to modern adaptations?
Very much in the same way as Sarah. As I mentioned, the first modern I did was a Persuasion adaptation because it's my favorite as well. I think I like how the characters have been around the block. They're not these young, starry-eyed, ingenues or whatever. And I was wondering what happens when you have two people whose careers pull them in very different directions. And in one case, my Anne character, who I've actually called Anne in the book, she's finishing a PhD. She's a composer. And her supervisor says, you've got to do this degree. You've got to finish it. You've got to do it here. I know people who can set you off in your career. And her boyfriend, Fred, is a conductor. And he's like, I've been invited to Italy. I'm going to train with a great composer in Italy. Come with me. And she's like, I can't. I've got to stay. I've got to finish my degree. And in this world, is there a way around that? Yes. But they're young and they're impressionable and they're told this is the only thing you can do, and they break up. So it's that same impulse. You've got the mentor who you really believe, who you trust, who you are convinced has your best interests at heart, pulling you in different directions. And this is the thing I find with Austen in general, is her situations are so universal and her characters are so universal that you can take the germ of a story that is set in a very different world, a different society, different characters, but they're so real and they're so well developed that you can transplant them into a modern world, and you change the background. It's like I can change this background to something else, but I'm still me. And I might react differently to having a beautiful English country house behind me than a bunch of books, or the clutter that was in here before I painted my room. But I'm still me. And Austen's characters, whatever you do with them, are still Austen. And if we can get back to music theme, which Amanda, I'm sure, will understand, and any musicians, if you listen to a Bach fugue, like, it's a brilliant piece of music, but you can play it on an organ or a string orchestra. You could adapt it for steel drums. You can put a beatbox to it. The music is still brilliant. And I find that's what the same with Austen is. You can take this germ, the nub, the essence of it, and you can do so many things with it. And it's still brilliant. And I love exploring that. And that's one of the things I love about adapting these classics to a modern world, is you can see the brilliance coming through, even through different voices and different times and different eras.
I think that's what makes it so cozy to read Jane Austen fan fiction, is that you can just skip right to already knowing what this character is going to be like when you pick up a book to read it. And it allows the story to really be the highlight rather than having to build this person's character and get to know them and get to know what to expect out of their actions. Like, we skip all that and we just get right into the plot of things happening because we have this understanding of who they already are. It's kind of like, starting in the middle of a series and we already know how this character is going to act, but now we can see them in so many different versions of themselves. And I really love that part of reading fan fiction. So Sarah, let's go to you. What do you think, or do you think there's any challenges to when you write a modern adaptation, then dealing with societal norms, cultural differences? Is it hard to make that a comfortable space for the reader to enjoy it, or do you think it's not that much to overcome?
I think when you're modernizing, it's not for some of these books, it's not that difficult to overcome. The reason I've never taken on Sense and Sensibility is because I think the societal norms are so very critical to why the characters are the way they are in that book. Like, Marianne's a flighty romantic. She could not be, I mean, she could be a flighty romantic in the world, but for Eleanor to sit and carry the entire load of this family, financial, emotional, societal, on her shoulders in this day and age is just completely unrealistic. And I think I struggle to read my other people's attempts to modernize Sense and Sensibility, but I think that taking the themes and the characters, she did, Austen, and from the way I have read her, never really anchored societal norms into the characters. She did it into the scenes around them, the settings that she put them in. And then I think it's Lucy Wellesley has that great book about Jane Austen and home always comes back in her themes. So if you think of like, I think of how would this be possible in this day and age? And there are times when I stumble, I think, but for the most part, society hasn't changed that much. The tools around us have changed, but we're very similar. We love a little bit of gossip. We love to be around the people we love. We like people to follow the rules, whatever those rules may be. And we sometimes cheer on, but also tisk those who break the rules. So I think for me, reframing it in the modern era has been easy, but I am always conscious of, will this translate well? How can I adapt this little element? And I'm trying to think of one specific element, and it's the Charlotte Collins marriage, that she rushes so quickly into marrying him. People did not like that when I rushed a modern character into marrying a Mr. Collins character. They just didn't think it made sense. And I thought, it's not an unfair criticism, but this is her backstory to justify that.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Have you seen the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, that YouTube series? I thought they did that part really well. Where it wasn't a marriage, it was a job offer.
Yeah.
It was, I need a job now. I'm like, and that you can understand someone rushing into.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very, very cleverly handled. Sorry,
No, that was where my head was when I was doing Pride, Prejudice, and Pledging, and I thought, oh, but if I make it a job offer, it's just going to look like I'm too leaning too much into their example.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more I realized the Charlotte character I was writing needed any excuse she could grab to get out of the situation she might have to return to. I was like, it's a stretch, but I can justify it. Give me 15 minutes and a map.
If I had to make one book recommendation of a book, I think it is not meant to be fan fiction, but it kind of gives those Sense and Sensibility vibes of doing a great job of a sister really feeling to look out for the younger sister and everything. It's Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I think it does a really interesting, it's got that dynamic of the sister that feels like she's taken on the weight of everything and has to provide and like fix all the mistakes for the sisters and everything like that comes with it. So
it's on my wish list on Libby, so I will move that up to put a hold on it.
So I will tell you what happened. I had it requested from the library, since they're librarian, for like 4 months, and I was, like 200th on the list for an Emily Henry release. And so my birthday, this is just like a week and a half ago, I was like, I'm going to go treat myself and I'm going to buy that book because I'm never going to get it. And I keep seeing everybody talk about it. I bought it and got home, and an hour later, I got the text from the library year-old.
Because the world knows.
Yes. It is a truth universally acknowledged. The library will send you the book as soon as you buy it for yourself. So,
yep.
Amanda, do you find it difficult to adapt to modern settings, or not too much for you?
I think there's some parts that are hard to adapt, like the Longbourn entail, for instance. Like, we don't really have entails anymore, so some authors like myself just choose to write that part out. It's not necessary for the plot sometimes. Other times you might want to try to modernize that part of the story, like with the Charlotte and Collins part, like, what's her motivation for getting married so quickly, you know, or is it going to be a job, something like that. But really, yeah, I think Rihanna said it. You know, we have this germ of the story that you can transplant it anywhere and it will grow. You know, I like to think of it kind of as, you know, we've got your Austen beat sheets, just like you do for modern, you know, contemporary writing. You have your beat sheets, and you can kind of take that beat sheet and put it into a variety of settings, and you put your highs and your lows and your, you know, character, you know, cross points in there, and somehow it still works. It doesn't matter if you've got, you know, Darcy and Elizabeth as, you know, business rivals or chefs or medical professionals or whatever the case may be. You know, somehow you can make them work in all of these different settings, and that's kind of amazing. Maybe you just have to kind of tweak some parts of the original story, you know, might not be relevant in certain storylines.
I have to say, you guys really surprised me with your answers, because I thought you would say it's difficult, but you make it seem not easy, because it's not easy to write a book. But you really made a case for why Austen's characters are so amazing, because you can take the core of just who they are as a person and put them into kind of any setting, and it works.
And almost any culture at the same time. I think it's Sonali Dev's series, which look at Indian American culture,
Yeah.
which is, it was enlightening. I loved reading those books because it was a different perspective. And I've read some that take place in the Caribbean or some in the Middle East, and I keep thinking, where doesn't this work? Show me where it doesn't work, especially Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, your Pride and Prejudice comment makes me think of the Bride and Prejudice adaptation, you know, set in India with the Bollywood. It just works. It does.
Yeah, because the characters are just, they're people. And you're like, I know someone who has not all of those traits, but like I can see that in people I know. And they're less based on situational stuff like Sense and Sensibility. Mm-hmm. And it's really just character driven, and people are people.
Absolutely. So, Now, what do you, when you write your books, want people to get out of a modern adaptation? And it doesn't have to be all layers of deep thought behind it, but what are you going for?
I mean, ultimately, a good story. But I think I'm going for trying to be as true as possible to the essence of Austen while making it as fresh and modern as I can. And really, I think, I mean, of course, I want people to buy my books and love them and give me fabulous 5-star reviews. But well, of course. But I also want people to love Austen. I want people to go, oh, this is really interesting. I've heard of her. I wonder what her actual books are like. So, you know, I want to be rich and famous and, you know, studied in universities, blah, blah, blah. But I think I want people to just find the brilliance of Austen herself.
I love that. Sarah, what about when you write? Is Austen sitting there next to you, kind of inspiring you as you go and making you want to lead people to her? Or do you just love the art of telling stories with her characters?
I think both. For me, it's so I do a lot of craft fairs to sell the books, and I do a lot. The local high schools tend to do like holiday craft fairs, so I'm always making sure I go to one. And the teenagers will always be around because their parents are there, they're volunteering, and they just seem to flock to the books. And I'm like, oh, because the covers are cute, but it's also, it makes Austen a little bit easier to understand. When I was 15 reading Austen, I had to understand society as well as adult relationships at the same time. And if you strip away the learning the history and the society and let people take that as they want, these are just people. We see the relationships around us. We all know a Darcy. Some of us are the Darcy, but we know these, and I think it makes Jane more accessible to have people enter it in the genre they love. So for those contemporary romance readers, the rom-com readers who might not pick up a historical romance, to get into even Jane Austen fan fiction, let alone Jane Austen, this gives them an entry point that already hits the bells and whistles they want. And also, she's an amazing storyteller. And it's so nice to pick up something where you understand the beats already.
Absolutely.
I think I'm the same way. Like, all of these characters, they might be set in a historical setting, they might be set in a modern setting, but yes, they're people just like us. And I hope that, my characters can see a glimpse of themselves in these characters as they're reading, and, recognize that we're all just people trying to live our lives and find love and happiness in this world. And none of us are perfect, but we all have a chance to learn from our mistakes and try to take hold of that happiness when it comes along. And well, I also hope that readers will see these heroes in our stories, and they'll decide to hold out for a real hero and not just settle for a Wickham or a Willoughby.
Or Mr. Collins.
Or Mr.
I think
Collins.
most people settle for a Mr. Collins than they do a Willoughby. They think they're finding true love with their Willoughbys.
Well, shall we jump into a little Jane Austen July? And I'll just give a brief if you're watching this and you haven't participated in a Jane Austen July before, I will leave down in the comments after we finish this a link to a video that I recorded, I think it was maybe last week, where it gives all the prompts for Jane Austen July. It tags the creators, so you can go and check out their videos doing a much more thorough explanation of what Jane Austen July is. But basically, it's a month where we celebrate Austen, and some lovely YouTubers have created some prompts to help you explore her books a little more, explore movie adaptations. And I think the spirit of this is to really just have fun exploring everything around Austen. You do not need to get through every single prompt. I know it feels like a lot when you first look at them. If you just maybe read a few more chapters of an Austen novel than you ever have before, that is amazing. If you maybe read a couple of her letters and you see her wit in her own way when she was writing to Cassandra, amazing. So play with it and have fun. But we thought we would share with you a little bit from each prompt what we might pick to read. I am definitely a mood reader. I don't know about the rest of you if you are as well. So I need like a stack of options to pick from, because I don't know what mood I'm going to be in by the time July gets here and we start going through these. So I whittled mine down. But if you have a few options to share for any of these prompts, please feel free to share what you think others might enjoy. So the first prompt is to read one of Jane Austen's novels. Does anyone want to volunteer to start us off for this part of it? I need to find my novel here.
Sure, I'll go. I think if you've never read any of Austen's novels before, I recommend starting with Pride and Prejudice. It's not her first one written, but I think it's kind of the standard, the pattern for all the rest. And I think if you read that one, it'll help you to understand kind of her style and understand some of the other ones a little bit better, even if the plots are not sequels of each other or anything like that. It's a kind of a great starting point. And I think it's the novel that for a lot of us made us fall in love with Jane Austen.
Perfect.
I am going to suggest Northanger Abbey. I think it's completely underappreciated, but it's for a very specific girl or guy or anybody. It's for those who want a little drama in their lives. You love to watch true crime, haunting stuff. If you get really into things and nobody appreciates how into it you are, be it Linen or the ghosts of your future husband's mother roaming an abbey, this is the book for you.
And I love the characters in Northanger Abbey, because Isabel Thorpe, everyone knows her. The instant fair weather friend. Sorry?
She's Regina George.
Yeah,
Mean Girl. She's the mean girl.
Yeah, she's this instant friend who is just your best buddy until she's not. Mm-hmm. And we've all known someone like that.
Every time I rewatch the movie, I want to scream as soon as she's like, let's be friends. Like, don't do it, Catherine. So she does every time.
There need to be more adaptations of Northanger Abbey.
Yeah.
Just
There.
Felicity Jones is a baby in the last one. She's so like there's so many like famous faces in it now, but they were just so young and innocent back
She's
then.
17. I mean, she is a baby.
Yeah.
I mean, she's 17. But
I love that movie.
it's it's a good movie, that one, but it's a fun book.
Yes.
And oh my goodness, it's haunted. It's a laundry list. Never mind.
It's a really great book too for getting to know Austen's humor, especially like that opening line about like despite her father being named Richard, like it just lets you sort of dive into her humor like without.
It is her truest, snarkiest book. Like she is clearly very irritated about something, and I feel it.
Pick to read is going to be Sense and Sensibility, because there's going to be a great readathon going on for the month. I believe the prompts are 2 chapters a day, and then the last few days doing 3 chapters a day, which is great for anyone that's also starting out to Austen to kind of do it in bite-sized pieces. If you get a little behind, you can catch up. It's not too bad. And another recommendation I have, if you've been reading Austen for a while, or if you're just starting out, is get a gorgeous copy that makes you want to grab it and read it, because I found this series, I don't know if anyone else, there's so many series of Austen novels out there, but this one just has, it looks like wallpaper. Like I would totally put that around my room. But what's great about this, it's the Winchester Austen, is from 2007, but it has some really great notes in the front. It has notes about Regency life, so it kind of gives you a little bit of context there, geographical settings, a modern perspective, and then let's see if I can find it. Oh, it gives you a breakdown of all the characters here as well. So if you're really new to Austen, this can be super helpful. We have transportation. I mean, this book is just an absolute gem, and there's a timeline somewhere in here as well of Austen's life. So I found this used on abooks.com, so maybe do a little shopping for a copy that you really are excited to grab, and I find that adds to the reading experience, and I justify that I need to have all the copies that I can find that look pretty.
I love the word cloud ones. They have the word,
yes.
and they're these soft faux leather bindings, but then they have like flowers or something, and then they made journals to go with some of them. So this is the Emma journal that I use for research, because I mean, if I'm going to learn things to write a book, I need a journal to write them in.
Right. I didn't know that they made journals to go along with those. That is fascinating. All right, so our next prompt is to read an Austen work that is not one of her published novels. So anybody have any recommendations for this one?
Lady Susan.
Lady Susan, that's a great one.
Yeah. The first time I read that, I'm like, do I have to? It's an epistolary novel. These things are always boring, and you have to blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, fine, I'll make myself do it. And I don't think I put it down until I was finished. It was funny and snarky, and you're like cheering for the good guys and booing for the bad guys. And it was fabulous. And it's all these letters. Like there's no narrative, right, but it tells a fabulous story. So yeah, I'd recommend that one.
It's a great pick.
I'm going to agree with that one.
Amanda, did you have anything different?
Yeah, last month I read Love and Friendship for the first time, which is one of her juvenilia, and it was just hilarious. I thought this is a hidden treasure of Austen's that I think people overlook, and it's definitely, you know, it's got all that satire in there. She's making fun of these incredibly over romantic girls. I'm seeing kind of a pattern here for Marianne Dashwood down the line, but you know, they're always fainting and swooning and we could do nothing but faint on the couch alternately. It's just great. And I thought, man, I wish there was more to this story. I wish there were more love and friendship books or fan fiction books of it, because it was a treasure that I think I've missed out on for a long time.
I think you know your next project now to work on.
Maybe.
So I have Leslie Castle here, which is a great one, and it's I think an accessible read if you're looking for something smaller. And then if you want bite-sized pieces, I have The Letters of Jane Austen, which is a lot of fun to read through her letters. And I did want to mention that if you are in our community as a friend of the foundation level, we send out a monthly narrated letter from Jane Austen, and it is really fun. The audiobook narrators always message and say, like, it's really interesting to do these letters because they're kind of trying to interpret her emotions behind what she was writing, and then they bring it to life as they're narrating it. And I personally think that's one of the extra hidden gems about our community that I love. And I'm always excited when it hits my inbox and I get to listen to them ahead of time and schedule them, because to my knowledge, her letters have not been narrated through before. So every month you get a new one as part of a perk for the community. Hazel says she loves her letters. Yes. And Hazel gets one every month because she is in our community. All right. Next, we have a nonfiction recommendation of Jane Austen. Anyone have anything picked out already? I will say I went with the creators of this Jane Austen July all gave the same recommendation of The Real Jane Austen by Paula Byrne. And so I had that on my shelf and I have not read it yet. So I am going to try to make my way through this. And what's really unique about this book is that kind of as you were saying, Sarah, about the Lucy Worsley Jane Austen at Home. Yes, this takes different pieces of her jewelry or table or things that were in her life, and it dedicates a chapter to each kind of piece of Jane Austen's history, which I thought was unique. But go ahead and show us yours.
So mine is Lucy Worsley, Jane Austen at Home, which really delves into Jane's history with homes, because they did, I think from our perspective, would bounce around from home to home, especially after her father died. And it was just her mother and Cassandra traveling and trying to find a home with her, but also the marriage proposals that she did receive and how enticing some of them might have been because of the home she would have had, but ultimately why she did not select those. And then her, of course, final home and how her family came to be there. My dog has woken up. He's stretching himself on the carpet. He's just delighted to have attention.
Hazel gives a recommendation here in the comment section too. She said, "What Matters in Jane Austen" by John Mullen is a great one.
Yeah.
So definitely give that one a try as well.
And there's also one about her and Cassandra and their relationship, and it features the letters she wrote to her sister.
Is it the Jane Austen's best friend? No, that's about Martha Lloyd. Cassandra. I'll have to think and see if I can.
I want to reach for my phone and get on Goodreads and see what it is, because I know I've read it.
Yeah. Another book, not about Austen herself, but about the Regency era, is, I have to remember the title, The Time Traveler's Guide to Regency Britain, in Mortimer, I think. And that's just a good, okay, that's the one. That just gives you all the background. It's like, it just helps situate the details.
This one is a lot. It's like great to pick up in small doses, I think, because it's just packed with so much information. And I think there's an audiobook version of this as well that I've heard some other authors say they like to kind of take it in that way as well. Amanda, did you have a nonfiction for us?
Yeah, I have Claire Tomalin's biography on my reading list this month, and I started on that, and it's fabulous. So I think that's a good one to add to that stack.
There's a lot out there. It can almost be overwhelming to know where to start with nonfiction.
Yes.
All right, and then we come to everyone's favorite prompt, fan fiction or retellings of Austen.
Well, all of mine, of course.
Of course, you're allowed to plug everyone. Check out everyone that's on today, their books.
Okay, for those who want a cozy murder mystery
Ooh.
Yes.
and hate Mr. Wickham,
Yes.
There's 2 books so far in the series. Claudia Gray did this great job of building a mystery, reminding you how all of Austen's characters could potentially connect, and then bring you the next generation. So the Tilney's daughter and the Darcy's son. And I loved reading this. I love a good murder mystery. I'm a multi-genre reader, so sticking to romance, my entry into Jane Austen fan fiction and adaptations was Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies.
That
And
was
that's when I
fun.
thought,
That
oh,
was
I can do
fun.
anything, can't I? There are no rules anymore.
Yeah.
And so I quickly find those that are murder mysteries to go with, uh, or a fantasy version. I didn't love Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters as much as Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, but it felt like they were trying to grasp, capture something that had just been magic to begin with. So
Yeah, I've had a
And
lot of
if you
fun.
like murder mysteries, definitely check out Rihanna's books. Her Miss
Yeah,
Mary
they're so
Investigates.
much fun. For me, I think the gateway drug. Oh goodness, have to remember the names of these books. Pamela Aiden's series, an assembly. Yes, you've got that one there. Yeah, yes, those are my gate. Those were the gateway drug. Yeah, those were them. I found one of them secondhand bookshop out on the front on the sidewalk. One says, "Oh, that's interesting," and then I went hunting for the others. So
I can be the Vanna. My bookshelf is within arm's reach.
okay, there you go. Yeah, those for me, those were. I mean, there are all sorts of fabulous books out there, but those were my gateway drug.
Yeah, it's so hard to pick a favorite. There's just so many great Jane Austen fan fiction authors out there, and of course, we hope you'll read all of our books. But if I had to pick a standout favorite that I've read in the last year, it would probably be Darcy's Hope Saga by Ginger Monette. It's set in World War One as Pride and Prejudice, and it really just was heart-wrenching, but in a good way. I think I cried through the second half of the book, but it does have a happy ending, and it was just really, really good. So that was a standout one for me out of the dozens that I've read in the last year or so.
I love it. Sarah, there's actually 3 books in Claudia Gray's series now. The last one is a Lady Catherine book, and I won't give anything away about the twist in that, but I will say the first one that you recommended is my favorite out of the series. I think it's the best because you see kind of all of Austen's characters come together there, and she does a really great job with the first of the series. Hazel says Mr. Darcy Came to Dinner by Jack Caldwell. That's her recommendation. It says where Darcy is laid up at Longbourn with a broken leg. Love that. And then one of my recommendations is An Affectionate Heart by Heather Mall. I love Heather's books. She does a really great job if you love historical setting. It's not modern. And then one of my other favorites, and I know it is so hard when I was looking at my shelf, but it's funny enough, goes back to Northanger Abbey. I love Shannon Winslow's Murder at Northanger Abbey. That was one of my first Jane Austen fan fictions that I read that wasn't a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and I absolutely love that book as well.
I got to do a plug for a modernization, though, because we have talked primarily historical.
Actually, so go ahead.
My modern that I loved is Pride. And I'm gonna Ibi Zaboy, I think is how she pronounces her name. Please, apologies if I mispronounced it. But this is Pride and Prejudice, but set in Brooklyn, New York, around economic disparity, gentrification, and the wealthy Darcy family moves into a not so wealthy neighborhood. And so it's very contemporary and very diverse compared to some of the other things that I've read.
My 14-year-old son just read that, and he said, I don't get all the hype about Mr. Darcy. I just don't see what it is. So he's been reading through. There's a new, it's described as Northanger Abbey meets X-Files, YA. that just released, and we grabbed that from the library the other day. I will have to look up the title and put it in the comments because I cannot remember
That
what it
sounds like I need to read that now.
is. There's so many good books out there. It's hard to catch everything. All right, we'll wrap up here because I know we're getting close to the end. We had a contemporary of Austen, which I think is a little bit more difficult one to come up with. Rihanna, why don't you tell us yours? Because I think you had a great idea that might be a little bit more accessible for people.
Sorry, a contemporary Austen, screen adaptation or
A contemporary writer of Austen's.
A contemporary of hers. Okay, not a modern contemporary. So it's a little later than Austen's time, but I love Anne Bronte. Of the three Bronte sisters, she's probably the least known, least read, but her novel, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, for me is just the best book of the whole lot. It's dealing with similar times and social conventions, but it's also very, very modern. It deals with alcoholism and abuse and a woman trying to escape her old life, and it's just a brilliantly told story. I'd really recommend that one.
I love that. There can be a loose interpretation, I think. And again, if it gets people reading, that is what we're here for.
Okay.
I grabbed, because I was looking to see if I had anything on my shelf, I grabbed The House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I just picked this one up in a little library sale, and he was born in 1804. So was alive, same time period as Jane Austen was alive, but obviously an American writer. So I thought that would be kind of a loose interpretation to add into the mix for reading.
I don't have one. We were talking about this earlier. It's hard to find contemporaries because we're so used to having so many authors to pick and choose from to make connections between. But in her time, there weren't a lot of fiction authors. There are some, then they tend to be very famous, but there weren't a whole lot. I do love my Brontes, though. Give me a problematic hero. From a Bronte perspective, put him on like the moors of some British town, and I am like, Heathcliff is still like, I don't know why I still love Heathcliff after all these years. Don't really love Rochester as much as I did.
I'll take Rochester. It's okay. I'll save you from him.
We don't have to fight over
to share. But Heathcliff, I still cannot stop loving Heathcliff. And I think Austen would have been appalled.
Yeah, before Mr. Darcy came along, it was Mr. Rochester for me. And I think I read Jane Eyre probably 4 or 5 times, in that period from about 16 to 18 until I discovered Pride and Prejudice. And then, wow, Mr. Rochester just had to leave because there was no room in my heart for anyone but Mr. Darcy anymore. But I think as a whole, I think the Bronte stories are, they're definitely darker than Austen's, but I think they share some similarities as far as exploring the different societal struggles that women had, of having their destinies decided by men and other people around them, and fighting against that to try to, make something of themselves and find love and happiness.
I love it. And Hazel says she has The Monk on her list, which I was just listening to a podcast this morning about The Monk and kind of a deep dive into all the characters and things. And that's when I really started to notice that I feel like our books nowadays do not have as many characters as some of these books in Austen's time. Like, the character list is just crazy. I'm trying to keep everybody straight, let alone read through the book, but that is what I would love to read at some point in time. I don't know if I'm there yet.
Emma has so many characters that it's hard to figure out if they're worth your time when you modernize. Like, do I need to bring this character in for I can't think of another name.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I hadn't really considered it before, but I think there's definitely a shift and a paring down of, I mean, maybe it depends on the genre that you're reading, but I think we're much more selective with who makes it into the stories nowadays. All right, and then we have let's do a screen adaptation of Austen that you would pick to watch.
Well, for me, it's a toss up between the 1995 Pride and Prejudice and the 2005 one. I think they're both great for different reasons. I know some readers hate one or hate the other, but like the 1995 one, I mean, it's just gorgeous, and it's by far the most accurate one, I think, of all the versions. And well, you've got Colin Firth, so there's that, but it's also very long, and you may not always have 6 hours to watch that series. So I think the 2005 one is great. They've condensed all the major plot points down to a 2 hour film, and
a beautiful movie.
It's just really, really beautiful. Like I always say, that's the most romantic adaptation. Like of all the Jane Austen adaptations out there, it's the most romantic. They've got the scenery, the cinematography, the music. They did a really great job of it. And, I know readers hate on it because of, certain inaccuracies with the hair and the clothes and the pig walking through, the passageway there. But it's as far as having a condensed, bite-sized version of Pride and Prejudice that you can consume in one sitting, I think that's, just you can't beat that for that part. So yeah, it's really a toss up. Like you have 6 hours to watch a mini series, you have 2 hours to watch a movie. You can't go wrong with either of those choices.
I'm gonna pick the Emmas to choose from. If you have a nice afternoon for a long mini series, the Romola Garari, I think Johnny Lee Miller's the Knightley in that one. That's my favorite Emma adaptation. But also the more recent one that came out right before the world shut down, with Anya Taylor-Joy was just delightful, and it's like it just leaned into the humor of it all, like her like warming her butt against the fire, but her father was just so. It was so well handled that his hypochondria could be used to their benefit. So I think it did a really good job of also showing Emma's position in their community, and that she truly, I think the other adaptations have sort of dismissed that she doesn't need anything. She has everything she wants. She has standing. She has power. She doesn't need a man. She's Emma. And I think the 2000 adaptation really hinted on what that truly meant better than some other adaptations have.
Yeah, I expected to hate that movie. I saw the clips. I'm like, oh gosh, really? Do I have to? And I was on a flight, and it was one of the options. Like, okay, fine, okay. I watched it on the flight back, and then I watched it again on another flight because one of the options, because I liked it so much. So yeah, I thought the 2020 Emma was fabulous.
My first watch of that one I saw the week before everything shut down, and I went with a friend that had no frame of reference. She was not an Austen fan at all. And when the nosebleed happened, she leaned over and she said, "Is she dying?" And I lost it. That, and so I came away not loving it the first time, and now I've rewatched it so many times, and I fall in love with it a little more every time I watch it. And for me, it's Persuasion. I think all the adaptations of Persuasion are just amazing in their own unique ways. So I can never get tired of watching those. But I think I am going to use it as an excuse to watch the 95 Pride and Prejudice, because if not for Jane Austen July, then when are you going to make 6 hours to watch it?
This is true.
All right. And our very last question that we have that we'll wrap up is, do you have a modern adaptation to suggest? And now this is definitely an area that I have not really explored, so I am going to trust your recommendations, and then I'm going to watch something from it.
If you have a whole ton of time, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries is fabulous. It's so well done and so clever, and the integration with Twitter and Pinterest and I like all of the social media, because it's done as a series of blogs of YouTube blogs. So I thought that was really, really well done. Yeah, and the book.
And the book that accompanies it is a great contemporary choice for a book this summer. I loved. They also did an Emma version where she's like a guru. But I think I mean, if you haven't watched Clueless yet, why not? Watch Clueless.
Yeah.
It's probably what launched modernizing classics into popular culture.
Okay.
Yeah. And earlier we discussed how difficult it is to put Sense and Sensibility into the modern age. I felt like Prada to Nada did that really well. It kind of disguises itself. You don't necessarily know it's Austen, kind of like Clueless, but I felt like that one did a good job of putting the Sense and Sensibility sisters into a modern setting. They're in LA, and they go from, the Beverly Hills side of town down to, more the hood, and it was a great version of that, I thought. I also really liked Pride and Prejudice Atlanta. It was like all Black cast set in obviously Atlanta, Lifetime movie, and that was a really fun, well done adaptation. Mr. Bennett is the pastor of a mega church there, and Mrs. Bennett is very eager to marry off all her daughters to handsome, wealthy men, and it just oozes with Southern charm, and it was a great one.
I love it. Thank you so much for your recommendations, and thank you so much for joining today. I had a blast talking about Austen. It just it's so much fun because everyone has unique perspectives, and getting to hear about your writing process and how you modernize her characters and her stories is just so much fun. I did want to let anyone know this watching that if you want to join in Jane Austen July and you like to have like a printable thing, I know we have our monthly reading challenges. I am visual, so I like to print it out and then cross it off and write, but I've been reading for each prompt throughout the month. Or you can grab a screenshot that will be going up in the community, so you can join and you can grab that for free. Like I mentioned before, if you want to sign up, we do have a couple of tiers that you can unlock a whole lot more with the tiers. And just to let you know, if you're brand new to even discovering the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation, we are a nonprofit started by Caroline Jane Knight, the fifth great niece of Jane Austen and the last of Austen's family members who grew up in Chawton House. We are run by volunteers, and your community membership goes back to helping us fund literacy programs throughout the world for children in need. So that can be from helping teachers or helping bring tangible things into the classroom that help them with their literacy efforts. So we really appreciate when you join in and help us. And I know so many of us obviously love Austen, and we had a great relationship with reading from our childhood a lot of times. And so to be able to give that gift to children throughout the world is, I know it keeps me going and doing this, because reading was everything to me when I was little. And I was just talking to my son about biking to the library when I was younger and checking out masses of books and then bringing them back the next week and already needing a ton of more books. And so I just think of, children where it might not be possible for them to do that, but if we can bring some books into their lives to bring a little bit of that joy to them, can really make a difference in where their life ends up because of that. So thank you to each one of you for joining. It was truly my privilege to get to hang out with you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and I just love hanging out with you ladies.
Also, Hazel, I see your suggestion that we rewatch 2020, watching The Woodhouse Footman.
Yes.
I've heard from many people to rewatch with them.
Yes. Hilarious.
Okay, you've heard it from Hazel. We all have to rewatch now the 2020 Emma and report back of what we see on there. So I can't wait to hear what everybody's reading for Jane Austen July and seeing everyone's progress. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I feel like I'm going to have to cheat on some reading time and now be rewatching and watching some new adaptations as well. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.